Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Autodesk Construction Solutions webinar, integrating AutoCAD with Autodesk Build. Before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. Your line should be muted by default to reduce background noise, but please mute yourself if this isn't already the case. If you have any questions, please add them in the question box during the presentation, and we'll address them at the end. Also, please note, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar in the next few days, so you don't need to take notes if you're planning on doing that. And finally, you will also receive a short summary at the end of the webinar, which will take 1 to 2 minutes to complete. We really appreciate your responses because it does help provide us with helpful feedback. So the agenda for today is just, we're going to start with some introductions and an overview of the sessions. Then we're going to dive a little bit deeper into why you should add Autodesk Build to your AutoCAD workflows, how to create a single source of truth, improve collaboration, clarity and confidence for project teams, and how to connect stakeholders and workflows, and continue on your digital journey. Then my colleague will do a demonstration of how these workflows work. And then we will be, in the closing, we will ask the poll that we've just mentioned, and we will answer some questions that have come in through the question and answers. So first of all, let's meet the speakers. I'm Michael Kant. I'm an account executive for Autodesk Construction Solutions. I am joined here with my colleague Yves Veelaert, who is our technical solutions executive, who will also be running the demo part of the webinar. So let's just get started. So I think most of us know the power of AutoCAD. Users can draft, annotate, and design 2D geometry and 3D models with all kinds of objects. Tasks such as comparing drawings, counting, adding blocks, creating schedules can all be automated, and everything can be customized with add-on apps and APIs. However, we are still struggling with some challenges. Often files are exported and shared, and exported information is immediately outdated, increasing the chances of commenting on or even building from previous versions of designs. There's also a limited traceability over who has received which files and when. Chasing and collating feedback is a time-consuming process, and it can be hard to clarify changes. Multiple channels are being used, increasing the dangers of miscommunication, like for example, Outlook and WhatsApp, and all different kinds of tools are being used. So why should we add Autodesk Build to our AutoCAD workflows? Well, to start with, we can create a single source of truth this way, and we can share design files securely in their native format. New versions are automatically replaced, eliminating the risk of using outdated plans on the job site or in the design phase. In the current days where a lot of people are still working remotely, users can access files from any device, and users can compare past versions of designs, resulting in fewer errors because they can see in one blink of an eye what has been changed on those plans. Autodesk Build also offers alignment to the ISO 19650 naming convention. This will lead to improved communication and collaboration, because files can be accessed in a wide variety of formats from the office or on the job site. Through a cloud viewer, stakeholders can directly annotate plans with any changes, so there's no need for any additional software to be installed. Permissions can be set for each member on the project, either for editing or viewing, and design reviewers can be tagged and notified instantly, enabling real-time discourse. And this will lead to more clarity and confidence for the project teams. Any file in any format uploaded to Autodesk Build is completely traceable from the moment it's uploaded. The users can view the history of a file, and there's a guaranteed audit trail. This results in the elimination of doubt or disputes. There's time saved on follow-ups and tracking and finding out where everything went, and there's a higher level of transparency and greater confidence across the project teams. And we do this by connecting all the stakeholders and workflows. Autodesk Build is not just a document management system. It's a project communications tool that connects stakeholders across the lifecycle, from design all the way to operate through plan and build. This creates connected teams, connected workflows, and connected data that we then can use in a number of ways. This way, you can continue your digital journey, because currently a lot of knowledge is still stored in traditional file types, with projects often including multiple formats. This creates some issues. With Autodesk Build, teams have the flexibility of managing and visualizing a wide range of file types as they transition, for example, from 2D to 3D in the future. So if you want to achieve better outcomes, the best way to do this is integrate AutoCAD with Autodesk Build. This way you connect everyone from the design team and supporting disciplines all the way through to the construction team and the owners. Having an accessible single source of truth streamlines workflows, improves transparency, and mitigates errors for better collaboration on construction projects. And this will also help you support transitioning to 3D modeling that can help designers transform for the future. So I hope you are ready for a demonstration. I will now give control to my colleague Yves. Give 2 seconds.
All right, thank you very much, Michael. All right, so we've got like, I'd say half an hour to give you a bit of an overview as to what we can do effectively by extending our workflows from just AutoCAD into this cloud-based communication platform. And you've heard Michael say that already. It's really around activating extended workflows, I would say, more workflows, and they're all around communication. So before we dive into like what we can do with AutoCAD itself and how it connects into the cloud, let me first give you sort of a basic overview as to what it is we're looking at. So essentially, this is the cloud-based interface. So in a nutshell, to start with, we have to start somewhere by in explaining this whole environment. Just to begin with, think of it as sort of Windows Explorer in the cloud. Okay, so we've got our folders, we've got our subfolders, and we've got our data. So one of the things that you'll see here, for instance, is that I did create one folder. We'll talk about the rest in a second as well. But I've got this one folder that will hold AutoCAD files. And you'll notice I'm in this project called Overview Demo Infra. Now, I've got 2 of these projects here. So I've got this Overview Demo Building, which is a different project. So we can have actually as many projects as we want, and we can set up templates for these projects. So if you think of like, you know, I've got residential projects, hospital projects, nuclear projects, you could actually set up defaults and templates for all of these different types of projects. So I have the same thing going on here. So I've got my design, I've got my AutoCAD, and in this case, I do have some files already in here. And what you'll notice, and this is something that I did want to draw your attention to, is the fact that no matter what AutoCAD you're using, be that vanilla AutoCAD, be that Civil 3D, be that Architectural Desktop maybe, all of these can collaborate, can work, can be integrated, can be connected to the cloud. So what you see here effectively, and we'll show this from an AutoCAD point of view in a second, is basic AutoCAD with, you know, sheet sets. And I know not everyone is using sheet sets, but this is just to illustrate, well, if I can show you sheet sets, then a basic DWG will also work, of course. So we're going to see that in a second. So that's kind of the first aspect. We've got this cloud-based environment in which, of course, we can set permissions. So this is all a bit of configuration that we can do at the beginning, which we can also set up in those templates. And effectively what you're going to see is that we have all these users, and actually what we can do when we create users in the system, they're going to have a name and an email address, but they're also going to have one or multiple roles, and they're going to have one or more companies they work for, with the default company being set at the start. So what I can do is I can set permissions on these different levels for those different companies and or different roles and or different users. And when it comes to access, well, we've got view, We've got view and download. Again, this is not about giving you a training on our cloud offering. It's just to show you the flexibility as to how to set up the system and how to have multiple people communicate with this. And so one of the things actually is this first level of access, which is view, right? So view, as you can see, is even less than view and download. So it means that actually I can view these files, but I can't download them. And so when it comes to communication, what this means is that I need a viewer inside of the cloud because I won't be able to download, I won't be able to open in AutoCAD, I won't be able to open in other tools, etc. So one of the key concepts of this environment is that we have a viewer which supports, I'll just say, a great many different types of file formats, not just the Autodesk ones, not just DWG ones, but also others. And let me elaborate on that later on. But it essentially means that if I'm going to upload to a folder to which I have, for instance, edit rights, and you as an audience have view rights, I'm absolutely sure that I have just communicated a file that you cannot download, that you cannot edit, but you can consult, view, and actually give feedback on. That's sort of essentially what is happening here. One of the other things with Docs, which is what you see here, Autodesk Docs, is that this system comes with unlimited file storage. It comes with unlimited files. It comes with unlimited file size. Essentially, you can upload as many documents to this system as you want per project in any given number of projects. That's essentially what is happening here. Okay, so that's one aspect. Now, how do we connect AutoCAD, for instance, to this system? And it depends a little bit on what type of design tool you're using. So we're going to focus on AutoCAD today. Let me just say that for a basic AutoCAD, vanilla AutoCAD, all you need is to install this thing called the desktop connector. And the desktop connector is nothing more than, probably most of you are using Dropbox or Box or SharePoint or Teams or whatever to communicate. And all of these have, a syncing folder or a syncing environment to the cloud. That's effectively what we have here, and that's what we call desktop connector. So you'll see that I have this tool here, or this icon here in my taskbar, which says Autodesk Desktop Connector, and it essentially means that I have this environment, Autodesk Docs, with all of the different environments, and we're just focusing on this one here. And then you're going to see all of the different projects that we have. So if you look at overview, demo, airport, building, infra, etc. If I come back in here, I look at this, you're going to see that if I start typing overview, for instance, you're going to see indeed overview, demo, airport, building, infra, etc. So that's a real view on what is happening in the cloud. One of the things before I come back to desktop connector is that you're going to see that because we have unlimited file storage, unlimited file sizes, unlimited projects, etc., we store all versions in the cloud. And we'll come back to that in a second. Do notice that, for instance, most of these files, they're at version 1. And actually, this structural file is at version 2, which is a basic DWG file. You'll also notice something that is a review status. Again, we'll talk about that later on. But as I mentioned, let's come back here to desktop connector. So this is just basically, so if I open this up, overview, demo, building, you're going to see project files, design, AutoCAD. We've got this folder underneath called architectural, and we're going to have all these files. Now you're going to notice that it says synced here, and it's going to show me those different versions. So if you think of it, are we syncing the whole time? Are we synchronizing the whole time? And the answer is no, and there's a very good reason for that, because you have unlimited file storage. So if we're going to sync all of your projects, all of your files, all of those point clouds, all of those massive Revit files, DWGs, etc., to the local machine, I'm pretty sure that you're going to run out of disk storage. So what this is that if I open a file, so you get visibility on the files, but if you really want to open them, then only on that at that moment in time, it's going to synchronize with the cloud. Now, this is something that you can actually force. So if I come back to AutoCAD here, right click, I can actually sync. And that's effectively what I've done here, just to illustrate, the fact that we have all these files. So there is flexibility of saying, look, I want all of this folder content to be synchronized to my local machine. That's totally possible. Now, just to illustrate how far we take this integration with Windows Explorer, because this doesn't stop with AutoCAD. You'll see in a second, I'll go to AutoCAD, we'll open some files here. But the thing is that if this connects into the Windows Explorer system, then it means that any file type I can upload through this means into the environment. So essentially it means that if I come back here and let's take this one, for instance, nope, the other one, excuse me. So if I take the other one, this building environment, I can, for instance, go into spreadsheets. And as I mentioned, this viewer is critical to the whole story. This viewer allows us to view any file format up to, I believe, 60 different engineering and design file formats, but also, as you've just seen, Excel, Word, PowerPoint. We can do AVIs, movies in general, JPEGs, images, PDFs, etc., etc. Okay, so as I mentioned, we've got this AutoCAD folder with architectural, and as I mentioned in the beginning, we've got this second environment, which is infra, design, AutoCAD, nothing down below, right? So what we can do essentially is we can come back to the basic DOS commands from like 20 to 30 years ago, and I can just go in here and say, okay, I want to X copy my overview demo building, my design AutoCAD files, anything underneath, and put it into the project files, design AutoCAD of the infra project with a couple of flags or switches behind it. And it's quite simply gonna copy those files across. So what does that mean? It means that effectively, if I now go into overview demo, infra, project files, design, AutoCAD, you're going to see that it says status new architectural, and it's actually going to copy files across. Now, the second question is then, are we going to see this inside of this environment? And that's where desktop connector itself is going to come in. So as you can see, this is truly transferring data from and actually syncing from a local space into the cloud. So you're going to see in a second that all of this is going to be updated and that you're going to see, just give this a bit of time, but essentially what you're going to see is that all of those files are indeed going to be created just simply by using DOS commands. I'm just going to put this aside, this just run with it. This is just to illustrate how deep we integrate with the desktop applications. Okay, so coming back to my original environment. So we also mentioned that, you know, when we are going to be talking about communication between different users, between different companies, roles, etc., then we'd better have a format to, or a standard to negotiate. And one of the things is, of course, the folder structure itself, the files that we can copy out of a template as well, just simply by using DOS commands. But of course, we might want to be looking into file naming. And without going into too much detail, what we can do here is we can go into our naming standards and we can totally specify, let's just customize this. We can totally customize the file naming of our system. So we're going to have project, originator, volume system, for instance. We can customize this. And actually what you're going to see is that project, originator, volume system, etc. There are going to be properties that we're also maintaining so that we can search for those properties. And we can even go one step further, which is, well, maybe we want to have a certain format for certain file, for certain properties, attributes, if you will, that don't make up the file name. So this is the naming convention. Actually, what we can do is we can also create additional attributes in which we want to have, like, for instance, the suitability code of ISO 19650, which maybe isn't part of the file name, but certainly has to adhere and align with certain naming conventions, or a certain format, such as a pull-down list with like S0, S1, etc., etc. Revisions, classifications, we can set that up. However, the beauty of this whole thing is, let me just cancel out of this, is that we can apply this naming standard only to selected folders. So if you think of it, if I'm going to do some sketching and some testing and some basic drawing, and I want to make sure that it's essentially in the cloud, so at least some other people can view this, but maybe it's not part of the official workflow just yet, I can just chuck files in there as I see fit. So what you're going to see here is that I can actually select certain folders that need to align with the naming conventions and others don't. Okay. So essentially, if I come back here into my files, you're going to see that procedures is indeed aligned with this file naming convention. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Essentially, if I was to drop a file in here or save a file in here, we can actually choose to get into this, what I'd like to call limbo state, if the file name doesn't align with the naming convention. And that's what we call the holding area. And that's where we can view files that aren't aligned with the file naming convention. And we can have certain roles within the company to review those file names. Rectify them or send them back essentially to the originator of the files and make sure that everything is aligned. So that's what you're going to see here. Okay, so enough of the environment itself. Let's now actually go into AutoCAD. And by the way, as you can see, my DOS command is finished. It copied 28 files. So I just copied the whole thing across to the other side, infra. So if I look at this, this is now copied just about everything inside here, right? If there's still things that are syncing, you're gonna see that in here. So yeah, there's still a couple of things that are syncing, but no matter, this is now copying across. Okay, so enough of the infra project. Let's go into our building here, building project. And as you've noticed, I've got my AutoCAD files in here, architectural, with a sheet set, etc. So if I come back to AutoCAD, or if I go into AutoCAD, what I can do is then I can say, right, I want to have this overview demo building project files, design, AutoCAD architectural, this sheet here, or this sheet set. I can just simply load that. And, you know, I can start opening these files. So one of the things that you're going to notice is that indeed those files do open up. I can save them. The second I save them and I close them, I'm going to get a new version in the cloud. And so people tend to ask me, how many files do you keep online? How much backup do you provide, etc.? Well, there is no backup, if you will. It all is, we've got unlimited file storage. So why would we eliminate certain versions? We keep everything online. So that's essentially what you see here. Now, I've just opened this file AS01. So if I come back to my environment here and just refresh for a second, then you're going to see that indeed, let's see, building. There we go, AS01. That's locked now. So it's now telling me logged by Eve at 1:27, which is indeed corresponding to just a minute ago. So this thing is continuously talking to my environment here. Okay. So let me tell you a story now. Let's go into sort of searching files, finding files, and let's see what has happened with this review status. So this is not a lesson about how to draw in AutoCAD. This is not a lesson about how to save within AutoCAD. This is about what sort of workflows, as again, Michael mentioned at the beginning, what sort of workflows can we actually add to this process? And it's not about designing. I'm absolutely sure that all of you on the call know exactly how to design in AutoCAD. But the question is, how do you communicate changes? How do you communicate all of these different file formats, etc.? So one of the first things that we can do is actually from the receiving side. Let's say that I'm now looking at architectural from a, as I said, receiving side. So somebody else has designed all of this. So what we can do now is I can subscribe to this folder. And it essentially means that anything that changes in here, I'm going to get a notification. We can also go the other way around, and I can actually say this file, something has changed to it, for instance. So I want to maybe, you know, share this file with someone else. And actually, as you can see, anyone with the link, just as we can in Microsoft Teams and SharePoint and what have you, I can actually build what we call a public link so that people can actually look at this file. As you'll notice, select version to share current version at the time the recipient opens, or current version at the time of sharing. So essentially, if this updates, I can choose whether to keep the original file that I shared or the updated one. So that's what you see here. Okay, so as I mentioned, let's go through the system here. And actually, I'm not interested in a DWF file. I'm not interested in a DWT file. So I'm just going to search for all of the DWGs here. There we go. So it's now searching through architectural, and this could be on any property. I'm just keeping it simple for today. And you're going to see that most of these files, they went through what we call a review status. So yes, there is a workflow concept, a workflow engine behind the scenes. And so what I can do now is I can quite simply sort by version, if you will. Okay. So if I go down this way, sort highest to lowest, then indeed you're going to see that I've got this S01.dwg, which has gone through a review process. Okay, so first thing, well, let's view this file. And so again, I'm coming back to that viewer, which is so critical to this story because it means I do not actually need AutoCAD to view files. I actually do not need to publish to PDFs to view files because I can be absolutely assured that if I give view rights to other people, they can view this file. And as you can see, they've got markup tools here, but that's effectively the only thing they can do. Okay, so this is actually version 2, right? You've seen that in list version 2. So does that mean there's a version 1? Of course there is. So I'm going to switch back to version 1. It does tell me not current here. And actually there's a markup here. And if I click on this, it's going to tell me that there is something wrong with the building code here. And it says 5 inches, the concrete slab. What I mentioned there, is this the correct thickness? So what you're going to see is that this whole system is interconnected, and I'll talk about that in a second when we're going to extend even to more workflows. But the point is that, let's just close this, all of the issues that are on this sheet, I can actually look at those, and we'll come back to that in a second. Just note this number, 28, okay? We're going to come back to that in a second. Right, so first of all, if I look at this, I can look at the activity log of this thing. Issue was created, assignee was added, description was added, due date was added, start date was added, root cause was added, etc., etc. So we get this communication not just as a pointer and saying you need to solve this by this time. I get the whole history of this. And actually, speaking of which, if I just come back here for a second and I look at my version 2 of this file, if I select this, I've got a couple of more buttons that pop up, and I can actually look at the file activities of what has happened to this file. Okay, so S01 version 2 view file activities. And as I mentioned, we're tracing everything. We're keeping everything. We're not ever throwing anything away. So you're going to see that if I look at the history of this thing, you can actually see when I started prepping for this webinar, I uploaded this file on October 18th at 9:20 a.m. So you can actually follow what I've done with this file. And one of the things that I've done here, and of course, this is a demo environment, it's just basically me, myself, and I. But this would suggest that, you know, I upload a file, somebody else reviews, refuses, approves, etc., etc. And that's essentially what we can filter out on. So I can say filter by users, companies, roles, etc. And I want to look at what Yves has done here. And let me see when he unlocked the file or locked the file, edited the description, publish a sheet, make current, etc., etc. So maybe when did we create, when did we add the file to the review process, for instance? There we go. Yves added this file to review number 6 and actually review number 5. And everything, as I said, is interconnected. The issue on the sheet, the fact that the file goes into a review process. So I can basically click on this and it's going to take me to docs, reviews, and it's opening review number 5. And that's where all the rest comes from. They're all approved, S01 rejected. Okay, so that's basically, if I now look at this, it's starting to make more sense because that's my not current version, version 1. And actually what you're going to see is this correct? Well, basically, if I go to my current version now, come on, current version. Bear with me for a second. And let's go back here for a second. Files, design, AutoCAD, architectural. So that's where all these review statuses come from. And what you're going to see is that this version 2, is therefore a different one. And I know now what I'm looking for because that's now 6 inches. But even if I didn't know, I could still go in and compare both versions here, put them on top of each other, or indeed put them side by side. And I could actually, this line is a separator between version 2, version 1. So what you're going to see is that, have a look at this here. As I move this over, this is now from 5 going to 6, see, or I could even take the line and move it like that, okay? So that's sort of the first kind of steps here. So what does that mean? Well, it essentially means that, as you've just seen, we've kind of connected everything, you know, the reviews, the files, there's also transmittals. Time won't permit for us to explain everything. But the point is that everything is connected. So actually, when you looked at that file and said issue number 25, I think it was, I can actually go into issues here, and it's going to show me all the issues that we have within the system. Actually, it's number 28, and we can see that because that's the building code. And as I said, everything is interconnected. So from the issues, I can now go back into my placement. So I can come back into S01, and it's going to take me to that file where I can have a look at those different issues. So now that we are inside of this workflow, we've reviewed this, we've approved review number 6, we could actually go in here and say, right, the status of this thing is now closed, for instance. There we go. Okay, so as I mentioned, everything connected. We can start reporting on this, which I'll talk about in a second. But the point is that we can go beyond just sharing information, just working with AutoCAD files, marking them up, reviewing them, having an understanding of what is happening here. This whole thing, why do we design? Because we're probably creating something, right? Or we have to hand over to a construction site at some point in time, or site workers. So that's why this whole environment is modular. So I've just shown you the basic docs functionality. What we can do is we can take this to the next level and say, okay, from all of my files that I have, I want certain sheets to be published into this environment. And so what you're going to see is that sheets, this system comes with a mobile device. We can actually take those DWGs and what have you and take them onto the construction site, mark them up on the construction site and send them back. So essentially, again, what you're going to see is I can filter here and I can say, you know, when did we upload this? Well, I've got a version 2 and version 3, issuance date October 18th. So if I look at this version 2, it's going to be all of those files, structural, etc., except for the structural 01 file because the thickness wasn't correct and we had to work on that. So if I now go to version 3, that's effectively that S01, which I have in here. And I'm going to see how much time is left. Maybe I can show you the mobile device in a second. But the point is that what you see here is identical on the mobile device. So people will be able to mark up those files. Actually, I can hyperlink from one sheet to another. That's also something that is being picked up by the system. And so we have this navigation just to make it very easy for people either in a design company or on a construction site or anywhere in between to actually understand what is going on here. Okay, so let me close that one again. Right, So one of the other things that Michael also mentioned was like it's future proof, because it's not just about 2D AutoCAD files. So many people are on the path of moving from 2D to 3D. I actually spoke to a company this morning who was still very much into AutoCAD. But the point is that because we have this viewer, we're pretty much agnostic to the file extension. We don't care about what the file extension is. So therefore, we don't care about the differences between the characteristics of a DWG file and, for instance, a Revit file. So I can actually go in here and say, okay, I want to see, for instance, a Revit file. And it's going to do the same thing, you know. Of course, there's going to be some differences in navigation because this is fully 3D. So I can actually go in and start walking here, go through this whole environment. There we go. If I wanted to, I could actually start measuring things in here, or I could set up sections. There we go. So we're actually going to be looking at those different views here. So I could actually decide to, you know, start turning this stuff around. Maybe I want to move this forward. There we go, etc. So if I come back here, let's do this a little bit more clean. So if I just go in here, there we go. There we go. That's better. Yeah. So if I now start walking again, you're gonna see that I can completely go through this whole thing, even with sections activated and everything. There we go. Okay. Now, another thing is, and this is now gonna move very fast because I do want to give you guys some time to ask questions. Like I said, this whole thing is interconnected. So you might have seen in the build environment, and let me just take the other one here. If I go to build. So again, these are filters on the system. So we've just uploaded AutoCAD files. We've just uploaded Revit files. We've communicated these sheets to the construction site. What you're gonna see is that no matter what project, if we activate Build, which is the module that is really connecting everyone together, then you're gonna see that we've got other things, not just issues and files and sheets, but we've got forms like checklists for the construction site. We can take pictures on the construction site. We can have meetings around certain events happening. We can even connect into Primavera P6 or Microsoft Project. We can extract assets out of the environment. And basically, and that's the last thing I'm going to show in a second, is reporting. Now, to bring all of this together, essentially, it means that if I look at this element, for instance, and if I go into its properties, then you're going to see, of course, this is a flat screen, right? Comes from Revit, could be an AutoCAD block, could be a 2D drawing, doesn't really matter. The point is that just about every design tool has a way of linking information, a URL, if you will. AutoCAD has it, Civil 3D has it, Revit has it, etc. So what we can do is we can look at all the elements inside of an AutoCAD file, Revit file, Civil 3D file, doesn't matter. And we can extract the objects that are of interest to us to follow on a construction site. And that's what we call assets. And so this thing is going to link. I'm not doing anything anymore. Now I'm just waiting for the system to bring up this tab on Google Chrome to take me to build in this project, to take me to the assets and to effectively select that one asset. And so you're going to see we're going to be following up on sort of digital twin type of information, installed, not installed, etc. But even more important, we have a bidirectional link. So I know exactly what element we're talking about in Revit. We've got barcodes. This thing comes with a mobile device, as I mentioned in the beginning. So we can actually start scanning barcodes, looking at that asset. And actually, if need be, I can find related information, such as the technical specifications for, in this case, said TV screen, for instance. So that's what we're having here. Multiple sheets, of course, in the PDF. And again, we can view all of this because that viewer allows us to do so. I mentioned forms, so maybe that asset needs to be installed and we need a checklist for that. So it's now bringing me to build forms and the detail on this form. This, by the way, could be any type of format or file that you see fit. This could be an Excel sheet, this could be a Word file. The only thing we need to do is convert it into a PDF and attach properties and fields to it so that we can start filling in and signing off on those elements. Okay, other thing that we can do, forms, TV, we've got a sheet that is aligned with that, etc. So essentially, as I mentioned, everything connected together. Okay, so we've got everything connected together. So that's cool from a communication point of view, be that AutoCAD or anything else. You're on a path to moving from 2D to 3D. That's fine. We support all of that. Basically, the workflows are the same. So communication is kind of sorted. But there's another benefit of doing it this way, because we can now say, okay, I want to understand how my project is doing, for instance. So all of this information from the construction side, from the design, designers sending data to one another, architectural to structural to technical, etc., will have all of that information inside here. So I can actually look and say, okay, from a design point of view, what are my project design issues? What's my design issue trend? Design issues by company. Again, this is a demo environment, so there's only one company, but you sort of get the idea, right? We can pretty much report on everything inside here. And not just on one project. Think of this. You're now part of a company that works on multiple projects across the globe, and we really want to get sort of visibility on our AutoCAD files. Who did we share them with? What's happening to them? Well, we can actually go to this executive overview. And this executive overview is basically telling me how my projects are doing. Without going into too much detail, this is predicting the future, actually. It's looking at the analysis of all my projects. It's looking at trends inside of that information, and it's predicting that, you know, the lower this code, the worse the project is. So my colleague in the UK, Kellen, well, he really made a mess of it, because this is not good from a quality point of view. But again, as I mentioned, this gives you this overview from an executive point of view. There's also a cost module that comes with Build, so we can actually look at budgets and everything. We can start looking at invoicing, etc., etc. So that's what we're going to be having here. And you know, this is all customizable, right? So I can go in here and I can say, you know what, that card needs to go to the left, or that card needs to go to the top, etc. Basically, we have a couple of cards here with pre-configured reports, and not just our own. We've got a whole development environment platform underneath, which is called Forge. And so we can connect to other things, such as, for instance, Esri, or for instance, Microsoft with Power BI, for instance. And Power BI, for those of you who are using it, basically any data source we can hook up to Power BI, we can report on it, right? So that means that, let's just go out of here, that if I look at this environment, then indeed I could have a Power BI card. So just bear with me for a second. I need to log in here. Send me a push. There we go. So for instance, one of the things that I've done here is, as a total view with a totally customizable Power BI template, I'm looking at my assets by project, for instance, so I can look at the different assets. Remember, the TV screen, for instance, could be an AutoCAD block that we're extracting as assets, etc. So basically, I can just see that, for instance, in my overview demo building, that we've got certain types of assets specified, delivered, installed. So we get total flexibility here. And the beauty is that you don't have to come up with these Power BI templates yourself, because we've created them for you. If you just go and look for Autodesk Construction Cloud, Power BI, you're gonna see some of the templates. So let me just show you one of the templates here. Open other report. I'm gonna go into my templates, and maybe, you know, we're looking at documents and approval, etc. So I wanna connect to my environment and have a docs dashboard. So this is something that we built, which is freely available, and you can understand what is happening with your different projects. Of course, I need to specify which environment it is. So let's just go here, load, and it's now connecting directly into the cloud, into my environment, and it's basically pulling at all those different, and again, I need to log in, excuse me for that. There we go. Connect. And essentially, this is going to be a live report as up to this moment, what has happened to the total environment. And it's basically going to look at all those different tables, if you will, all of that different information that we have inside of the cloud. And it's going to build me that Power BI template. So that's what you're going to see in a second. Just give this a moment. Come on. There we go, creating connection in model. It's now pulling that information. In the meantime, let me see if I can get some questions in, because this is effectively the end of the presentation. There we go. So the connection has been made. And there's my template with all of the information filled in. See? So as I mentioned, that's the end of the story. So hopefully that sort of resonates, the fact that everything is connected, whether it's AutoCAD or any other file type, we can communicate between those different file types, if you will. So with that, I'm gonna stop presenting my screen and I'm gonna hand back to Michael. So let me just stop sharing my screen. And Michael, the floor is yours. Okay.
Okay, sorry, I had some technical difficulties.
No worries, man, no worries.
Okay, so I think the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna launch the poll. And while we do that, I will gather some questions from the Q&A that we can answer for you. So let's just jump into the questions from the Q&A. Eve, how does AutoCAD to build fit in the wider picture of an organization and construction?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's sort of the presentation that I gave, right? So designing is just part of the story. It is truly around optimizing communication. What I hear from a lot of people is they're designing, or anything that you do inside of a construction process, if you will, they're sort of flying blind, you know, they don't know what is happening with the rest of the team, what they shared, is it the latest version, have they viewed the file, etc., etc. So what this does is it gives you total control over the audit trail, if you will. This is nothing more but an audit trail that connects different people together, and the type of workflows that you want to align with that is entirely up to the company. I do realize what we've shown today, there's quite a bit of information in here. The nice thing is that you can build this up slowly. So you can start with AutoCAD, save files, you know, just share files. And then afterwards, well, maybe we're going to use it with the markup capabilities inside. And we're going to be looking at issues. And then we're going to be looking at reporting on those issues. And maybe the next step then is, you know, I want to take this to the construction side, activate the mobile device, etc. So this is a continuous process based on a single source of truth. That's how it fits into that story.
Okay. Yeah, I think that ties in neatly with the next question. How do I get started? Can I have a trial for Autodesk Build or something like that? I can answer that myself.
Sure.
Yes, you can. We will be sending out a link afterwards as well to get started with an Autodesk Build trial. I think the next one is definitely for you. Do you have access to any additional workflows by exposing projects to the cloud?
A very good question again. So what we do is we provide a couple of, well, quite a few, I'd like to say, and like to think, quite a few workflows, for instance, checklists. The number of times I've heard people say, I've got worst situation, I've got a notebook, a paper notebook, and I'm writing down my checklists, etc. I'm filling out what the problem is. I've got this analog binder with all of my information in, and in the evening I fill in a spreadsheet. So one of those workflows is basically we give back time to people because those forms will be filled in, well, not automatically, you still have to fill in, of course, but they will be the digitized and digital version. We've got the cost aspect, so we can do invoicing. We can look at those different subcontractors and how they are performing. We can look at taking a Microsoft project or Primavera P6 project, look at those tasks and assign assets to them, for instance. So essentially, yes, we are exposing certain workflows. Now, what we tend to hear as well is when you start going into maintenance, for instance, then a lot of people have like an ERP system or a Relatix database or whatever with loads of information inside. So what I'm trying to say is that this system isn't a closed system, and let's be honest here, we're never ever gonna get to the point where Autodesk provides everything for the construction environment. There's gonna be CRM systems, there's gonna be HR systems, there's gonna be ERP systems, etc., etc. So what we've done is we've got a system that is open from an API point of view. That's why you saw in that listing of cards at the end with the reporting that we have integrations with third parties. So the workflows that you have in mind as a customer, if you have another system and you want to connect to it, well, basically my answer is if that other system has an API, chances are pretty good that we can combine it into a new workflow. And essentially, again, it's about communication, not doing things double, and having an efficient way of reporting on the whole situation.
Okay, and given the limited time we have, I think maybe just one more quick one.
Sure.
Someone who's already looking a little bit further. I've heard about progress tracking functionality in builds.
Oh,
Is this
yeah.
available?
It's progress tracking is in its final beta release. I think this is well, maybe not imminent, but it's certainly not something that's on the horizon for a long. Well, it's been on the horizon for a bit now, but I think it's getting closer and closer. I think it's nearing its completion, and you'll be hearing more of that very soon, I'd say.
Okay, that's good. I think, yeah, I think this is probably the best time to start closing it off because people probably will be thinking they keep talking a lot. So I
Yeah.
would like to thank everybody who joined the webinar. You
Thank
will
you
receive
all.
the recording afterwards, and we will send out more information in the next coming weeks. Thank you very much for joining our webinar.
Thank you all. Bye now.